We're talking about budget matters, and we hope that that's one of the ministries you say should be able to walk in and see the president. So we're hoping that some matters now will be as authoritative. Mark, bye.
Well, it would be lovely to set the scene for our viewers, but let's quickly proceed to another matter, which has to do with the budget. Joining us to discuss this is Mr. Ben Akabueze, who is the Director General of the Budget Office. If you recall, just I think it was sometime last week when the Senate resolved to call resolved to call the Minister of Budget and National Planning and also the Minister of Finance to find out just where we are with the 2017 budget. And they were at the Senate on Tuesday to give their submissions in terms of what is happening so far. 15% of the 2017 budget is what we understand has been released so far, Mr. Akabueze. What precisely is happening? You are the DG Budget Office. What precisely is happening? Why 15%? 4 months into the passage of the 2017 budget?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure we have 4 months yet. The budget was signed into law on June 12th. After the budget was passed, signed, there were processes, transmitting the document and all of that. But nevertheless, okay, the desire, on the date when after the budget was passed and we addressed the public on it, the Minister of Finance stated publicly that the target will be to release 350 billion naira immediately after that, and that's basically what has happened in effect. 340.9 billion naira had been released.
Just give us a moment now. Let us set the scene for our viewers so that they can follow the conversation which we're having here in the studio this morning.
The Minister of Finance, with other members of the executive team, arriving to face a joint committee of the Senate. It's a chance to see how well the 2017 budget is being implemented, especially as the 2018 budget proposal is being expected.
We are now 4 months into the implementation of the budget, and it is felt that Nigerians need to know how far we have gone, what we hope to achieve, the successes and problems or obstacles militating against the implementation of the budget.
Members of the economic team take turns to present their positions.
Under the 2016 appropriation, we released over 1.2 trillion capital, and most of it in the course of this year. It is because of those releases, partly because of those releases, that we are out of recession.
Capital 340.9, and I have circulated a schedule of that 340.9, and we of course successfully completed the Sukuk last week and raised 100 billion, which is to be released this week. So as at the end of this week we'll be at 440.9.
The lawmakers, however, have some reservations.
This desire to want to align the budget year to January, December, I don't really know how well thought out it has, the kind of thinking that has gone to it. Because it is going to throw up quite a number of challenges. Are we not, if we're not careful, almost going to lose an entire budget year?
The inflation rate in Brazil as of today is 2.46. The misery index is 10.2%. Nigeria inflation is 16.01%. Our misery index is 52.62%. Yet, because we recorded a 0.55 growth rate, we came out and told the whole world that we are out of recession. Meanwhile, Brazil is just saying we are crawling out of recession.
The ministers make it clear that the executive is focused on completing critical projects that have been prioritized and that they will keep the capital projects going and ensure that they are completed. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Well, quite a number of issues raised there. You were just answering the question before we went on, to set the scene for our viewers, why we're still at 15%.
Well, again, when you talk about us being still at 15%, you're speaking just to the capital expenditure component of the budget.
Which is where a lot of people are looking at.
Well, that may well be, but the capital expenditure is only 31% of the budget. There's nearly 70% of the budget which, has been running and continued. I mean, salaries are getting paid, debt service obligations are being met, statutory transfers are being, done on a monthly basis. Overheads are being funded. Some service-wide expenditures are being incurred. So, all in all, it's not 15%.
15% of the capital expenditure.
Exactly.
So
and then when you look at the 15% of the capital expenditure, aggregate capital expenditure in the 2017 budget was 2.3 trillion naira. Mm-hmm. The budget deficit was 2.3 trillion. And we projected to borrow 2.3 trillion. And the loss is you borrow for capital expenditure. So in essence, okay, this capital expenditure was projected to be funded by debt. Out of this 2.3 trillion that you expected to borrow, approximately 1.1 trillion of it was foreign debt.
Because it's cheaper.
Yes, which you require a resolution of the National Assembly to be able to, to do. That resolution hasn't happened. The other
Has it been requested?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. And that's what the Minister of Finance was talking about on Tuesday. The other 1.2 trillion is borrowing from the domestic market. And remember, when the budget was cast, the initial expectation was that you were casting a 12-month budget. And so domestic borrowing of 1.2 trillion was projected by DMO to be paced over the period, because the federal government has to be careful about its own, it has to time its domestic borrowing program very, well, in order not to, one, further put upward pressure on domestic interest rates, two, not to crowd out the private sector if it was being too dominant in the market. And so that's what. So when release, you can only release what you have.